Hello everyone and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso and we'll be looking at another discourse of the Buddha. This one's from the Sutta Nipata, chapter 4, sutta number 3. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha, and then I'll read through the discourse and give some commentary, and then type in questions at any time and I'll answer them at the end. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So, as mentioned, we'll be looking at Sutta Nipata 4.3, which is called the Duṭṭhaṭṭhakasutta, which is translated by Bhante Suddhāso here as 8 on malice, which is well, first off, 8 because it's a poem in 8 stanzas. However, malice is not exactly correct. So again, attaka means composed of 8, made of 8 things. However, dutta, it actually comes from the root dus, which means corrupt or defiled or flawed. And it's the root from which we get the word dosa. And dosa we most commonly know as the word for aversion or hate. When we talk about the 3 root defilements, we often call it lobha, dosa, and moha, or raga, dosa, and moha in some places. So dosa there is meaning the second root defilement, which is the root defilement of aversion or hostility or negativity. So there it does have a clear sense of, again, aversion, hostility, hatred. But the word dosa is also used throughout the suttas in a more generic sense to mean a flaw or a corruption or a distortion. So it also has that more general sense. So in that sense, any defilement is a flaw in the mind, a corruption of the mind. So it has both the specific meaning, again, of the aversion category of defilements, but it also has a more generic meaning of something that is corrupt or flawed or damaged in some way. Interestingly enough, the word is also used to refer to things like rust. So if you have a metal tool that becomes rusted out to the point where it's not properly usable anymore, then you would use the same word, dutta. You would say that the iron has become dutta, it's become corrupted, it's become flawed. Or something becomes, say if food goes moldy and rotten, you would also call it dutta in the sense that it's become corrupted and flawed. So this also gives a little bit of the imagery that the Buddha is using when he's talking about a mind which is full of defilements. And again, particularly the defilements of aversion, but also defilement in general. It's like a tool which is rusted out to the point where it's no longer useful. Or food that's become moldy and rotten to the point where it's no longer edible. So that's the same. The mind that's full of defilements, particularly aversion, is like a tool that's so rusty it becomes useless. The good news, of course, is that through Buddhist practice we can remove these defilements and corruptions from the mind, so they're reversible. The damage is not permanent. So we'll start reading through this discourse. So again, this is a discourse all in poetry, so 8 stanzas in Pali poetry. And Pali poetry is notoriously difficult to translate well into English. And there's many reasons for this. One reason is because the various words in the Pali language often contain multiple meanings. And discerning which meaning is intended in Pali is not always clear, especially in poetry. It's quite challenging. And also then trying to capture that sense accurately in English is also not particularly easy. While the prose translations of Pali Suttas tend to be fairly accurate, fairly readable, finding good translations of the poetic portions of the Pali Canon are quite difficult. So, we'll go ahead and start reading through this. So the first stanza says, Vanative dutta manapi eke, atopive satchamana vadanti, vadanchajatang muni no upeti, tasma muni natti kilo kuhinchi. And this Bhante Suddhāso translated as, some speak with malicious intent, while others speak set on truth. When disputes come up, a sage does not get involved, which is why they have no barrenness at all. So, as I mentioned before, the word dutta doesn't necessarily mean only malice or aversion, but it has a more general sense of corrupted. Again, here it's saying they speak with a corrupted mind. This doesn't necessarily mean an aversive or hostile or malicious mind, but it can mean a mind which is going under the influence of defilement. So acting out of greed or delusion would also qualify, not only speaking from aversion. So some speak with corrupted intent, some speak with defiled intent, while others speak from a mind of truth, a mind which is focused on truth. And so that's the first statement. It's first clarifying that there are these two basic ways of speaking. So one is speaking based upon one's defilements, and the other is speaking based upon commitment to truth. And of course, truth here is a deeper thing than just talking about whether your statements are true or false, but rather it's about a commitment to ultimate truth. So one whose mind is set on truth is someone who is intent upon transcending one's own delusions and developing the wisdom which clearly sees reality as it actually is. And then the line, when disputes come up, a sage does not get involved, which is why they have no barrenness at all. So this is actually relatively close to the Pali. Again, it's more saying, again, the sage doesn't get involved in arguments. The line, therefore, there is no barrenness in them. They have no hollowness or emptiness. So the word kila here means like a desert. Desert is a completely barren and empty land where nothing useful grows. So the Buddha sometimes uses this word in the suttas to talk about somebody who has a barren mind, an infertile mind. So their mind is so full of defilements that it's like a complete barren wasteland. So the Buddha here is saying, by contrast, the sage avoids getting involved in useless arguments. Therefore, their mind is not barren. It's not a wasteland. Then the next line in Pali says, Sakkan hi ditting katang achayeya, chanda nunito ruchiya nivito, sayang samattani pakubamano, yatahi janeya tatavadeya. So, the translation from Bhante Suddhāso says, how can you transcend your own view when you are led by preference and dogmatic in belief? Inventing your own undertakings, you would speak according to your notion. So the translation here is relatively okay. How can you transcend your own view? Yeah, how can you go past your own viewpoint? When you're led by preference and dogmatic in belief, chanda nunito, yeah, led by preference, ruchya nivito, yeah, and established in your own preference. So dogmatic in belief is not quite accurate here. It's just settled in your own preferences. So led by your own interests. So chanda nunito means led by your own interests, and ruchya nivito means established in your own preferences, your own likes and dislikes. So here he's saying that the Buddha is saying, how can you possibly overcome your own views and opinions when you're constantly just led around by your own desires, when you're constantly fixated on your own preferences, your own likes and dislikes. So this is pointing to one of the basic issues that can come up in conversation, in discussion, is the extreme difficulty that most people have in letting go of their own opinions, and the fixation on sticking to our own views because we like them, we prefer them. There's something that we find appealing. So whether they're true or not is beside the point, because we like them. Whether the other person has a point or not doesn't matter, because it's not our point. So there tends to be this kind of self-centered fixation in any kind of discussion. But the Buddha, in many places in the suttas, he says that one of the defining characteristics of a good Dhamma practitioner is that they are willing to accept criticism, and they do not cling tightly to their views, and they relinquish their opinions easily. So this is one quality that we really try to cultivate in our Dhamma practice, is the willingness to let go of our views and opinions, and to constantly be open to the possibility that we might have a distorted or inaccurate perception on things. So when we hear a viewpoint presented which is different from our own, rather than immediately settling on our own view as clearly the right one because it's mine, instead we should try to really objectively evaluate the views and opinions presented and try to figure out which one actually is closer to the truth. And this is especially important in matters of Dhamma. When it comes to matters of Dhamma, our number one priority should always be really trying to understand what the Buddha taught, trying to find out what the Buddha's viewpoint on things was, trying to understand what the underlying Dhamma principles are. Even if we don't like those principles, even if they don't match our preferences and pre-existing opinions, we should be constantly striving to set aside our pre-existing preferences and opinions, and instead really investigate the Dhamma and alter our mind in order to match the Dhamma, rather than trying to alter the Dhamma to match our own pre-existing opinions. And the second part of this stanza, again, inventing your own undertaking, so sayang samattani pakubhamano. Yeah, I mean, inventing your own opinions, your own ways of looking at the world, your own ways of doing things. And he says you'd speak according to your notion. Again, this is how ordinary people go through the world, is that they create their own opinions, they fixate on their own opinions, and they speak based upon their own opinions. But the Buddha is really encouraging us to examine that way of thinking and speaking, and recognize the absurdity of it. Rather, in conversation, we should constantly be open to the possibility that we might learn something new and therefore change our views and opinions. I still remember a time when I was a teenager and I was actually having a conversation with my brother. And we were going through the conversation, debating a particular topic. I don't even remember what the topic was because it's beside the point. But after we'd been talking for a few minutes, my brother interrupted the conversation, and he was quite frustrated. And he said he was finding it really hard to debate the point with me because I kept changing my standpoint on the matter. And I thought this was so strange. I'm like, isn't that what we're doing? We're sharing information and viewpoints and opinions, so naturally we should be changing our standpoint on the matter. Why would we not? In fact, it would be even more strange if we receive information and we don't reevaluate our standpoint. That would seem to indicate some kind of foolish adherence to something, regardless of what comes up, regardless of what counterpoints might be presented. So instead, here the Buddha is really encouraging us to always be open to the possibility that we might be wrong about something. And if somebody presents another viewpoint, we should really evaluate and investigate. Is my viewpoint incorrect? Is there validity in what they're presenting? And again, when it's matters of Dhamma, we should constantly be referring back to what the Buddha himself said, constantly digging deeper into it, constantly looking to see where our own views differ from the Buddha's views. So then the next line in Pali, it says, Yo atano silavatani jantu ananuputtova pare sapava anarya dhammang kusala tamahu yo atumanang sayameva pava. So in the translation it says, some, unasked, tell others of their own precepts and vows. They have an ignoble nature, say those who are skilled, since they speak on themselves of their own accord. So this is talking about somebody who is constantly boasting about their own spiritual practices, boasting about the religious undertakings that they do, boasting about the, again, precepts they follow, ceremonies they do, and doing so, why? In order to look good in front of others, in order to be more respected or more liked. So this is not to say that there's no value in telling other people about your religious practices, because there is value. But we need to know the right time and the place, and we need to investigate our own opinions. So for example, if somebody tells me, oh, I do bowing and chanting every morning, and then I do X amount of meditation, and I'm following the 5 precepts, it's like, well, that's wonderful. Those are all good things. And as somebody else who hears that might be inspired to take on those practices for themselves. And we can talk about why we follow these practices and how they support the training of the mind. That's all fine. The problem here is when one is bragging about it for the purpose of trying to make other people respect you more or like you more or have a higher opinion of you, because then the motivation is coming from one of self-centeredness and desire, rather than from a wish to help other people. So telling other people about our practices, if it's from the intention of inspiring and assisting them in the Buddhist path, then that's a good thing. But if it's just coming from our own self-centeredness and desire to increase our personal honor and so on, then that's not in line with Dhamma. So then the next line in Pali, Santo Chibiku abhinibbutatto iti hanti silesu akattamano tamarya dhammang kusala vadanti yasu sada natti kuhinchi loke. It says, a monk, peaceful, quenched, never boasts, I am thus, of their precepts. They have a noble nature, say those who are skilled, who have no pretensions about anything in the world. So here this is talking about how again, a well-developed Buddhist practitioner who has cultivated peacefulness within their own mind, who has made some effort to put out their defilements, to extinguish their defilements. They're not going to go around bragging about their practices. And really there's no need to. Somebody who practices Dhamma well, it's evident. You watch how they act, you watch how they walk, you watch how they talk. And you can clearly see the serenity of mind that they've cultivated. You can clearly see the gentleness of heart that they've cultivated. You can clearly see the wisdom that they've cultivated. There's no need for a practitioner to brag about their practice because it's evident for those who watch, for those who observe. And also there's recognizing, again, so someone who's practicing the Dhamma well, one of the critical aspects of Dhamma practice is the relinquishment of self-centeredness. So then there's also no need to praise yourself. There's no need to try to put yourself above others, because you recognize that there's no self to be cherished or held on to in the first place. Then the next verse, it says in Pali, Prakapita sankata yasa dhamma purakata santi avivadata yaratani passati anisangsang tang nisito kuppa paticca santing. So this says, for one who formulates and creates teachings and promotes them despite their defects, if they see an advantage for themselves, they become dependent on that, relying on unstable peace. So this is especially relevant when, these days, when we're dealing with a wide variety of different teachers who claim to be teaching Buddhism. But on closer examination, it often turns out that a lot of what they're teaching is not actually what the Buddha said. It's something that person has formulated on their own, It's something that they've cobbled together from various sources, mixed up with their own opinions and preferences and beliefs, but which they then present as being Buddhism, which they then present as being the Buddha's instructions. So this is something which is quite harmful. So first off, it's harmful because it prevents people from accessing the true Dhamma. It blurs and distorts what the Dhamma is for other people. So I've met people who really thought they were practicing Buddhism because their teacher said that they were teaching Buddhism. But over the course of a short conversation, it becomes really clear that what they're practicing and thinking has nothing whatsoever to do with what the Buddha said. It's something quite different, something quite distorted, and something which doesn't lead towards awakening. And then for the person themselves who is spreading misinformation about the Dhamma, then they're also harming themselves. They're preventing themselves from practicing well, preventing themselves from accessing the true Dhamma, and also cultivating, once again, arrogance. One of the clearest examples of this is there are a few examples in the world of people who have trademarked their own unique form of so-called Buddhist teaching. And, well, that's the thing, is you don't need to trademark the Buddhist teachings. It's been open source for 2,500 years. Actually, it's been open source literally forever. The Buddha didn't even invent it. He just rediscovered it. So, and the Buddha himself said he taught with an open hand. Everything completely revealed. Nothing held back, nothing concealed, nothing hidden. So this is the nature of the Dhamma. There's nothing proprietary about it. There's nothing personalized about it. So if somebody is teaching a proprietary, personalized Dhamma, something which is copyrighted and trademarked under their name, then you can be absolutely certain that it's not Buddhism. Yeah, it's something else. And the motives for teaching that doesn't have anything to do with attaining awakening, either for themselves or for others. So we need to be really attentive to that. Watching it in ourselves, watching that we ourselves are not creating our own false Dhamma, passing off our own false Dhamma to others, but also being attentive to what we're receiving from other sources. Is it actually based in the Buddha Dhamma? Is it actually based in the Buddha's instructions? Or is it just a teacher's opinion which they've cobbled together from who knows what sources? Then the next verse, in Pali, it says, Ditti nivesa nahi svativatta, dhammesu nichcheya samugahitang, tasma narotesu nivesanesu, nirasati adiyati chadammam. And Bhante Suddhāso translated this as, it is not easy to get over dogmatic views adopted after judging among the teachings. That is why among all these dogmas, a person rejects one teaching and takes up another. Dogmatic views is a bit of an awkward translation. The Pali here is ditti nivesa, which just means like settling on a viewpoint. Again, this tendency that we have to form an opinion about something and then settle on it. To get stuck on it. Like, no, this is my opinion. This is what I believe. This is how I think things are. Once again, it's not so easy for unenlightened people to figure out what's true and what's not true. This is the ultimate problem of delusion, is that we don't see reality clearly. We don't understand the nature of reality accurately, which means we're constantly just following around our own preferences and opinions. And so this also then is what tends to happen when people get into spiritual practice, is they're like, oh, well, I like this teacher, I like that teacher, I like this book, I don't like that book. I prefer this kind of practice, I don't prefer that kind of practice. Well, that's all well and good, and none of that will get you one step closer to awakening. So, there's lots of things that I like. That doesn't mean it's going to lead me towards awakening. There's lots of opinions and viewpoints and beliefs which I like. Some things I might actually prefer to Buddhism if only they were true. But committing yourself to those teachings and beliefs and opinions is not necessarily going to lead to awakening. So we really need to watch for this tendency to follow what we like and prefer, rather than trying to seek out what is actually the truth. Then the next verse, it says, Donasehi nati kuhinchi loke, pakapita ditti bhavabhavesu, ma yanchama nanchapahaya dono, sakena gatcheya anupayoso. Bhante Suddhāso translated this as, the cleansed one has no formulated view at all in the world about the different realms. Having given up illusion and conceit, by what path would they go? They are not involved. So again, this is talking about the practice of relinquishing views and opinions. We don't need to have an opinion about things. We don't necessarily need to have an opinion about every topic in the world. We also don't necessarily need to have a belief or a viewpoint about things. It's sufficient just to practice the Buddha's path, and we'll see for ourselves as time goes by. And also it's recognizing how often views and opinions are wrapped up in self-concept. What's translated here as conceit, which more specifically means self-concept, self-identity. It's like, well, I believe, it's my opinion. Well, noticing how much self there is wrapped up in that, how much self-concept and self-identity there is wrapped up in having one's personal set of views and opinions. So in Buddhist practice, we're striving to let go of our personal views and opinions and really take on the Buddha's way of looking at the world and see how that changes our relationship with truth. And then the final stanza says, Upyo hi dhammesu upeti varang, anupayang kena katang vadeya, atta niratta nahitasa atti, adosi so ditting ideva sabbanti. So the Buddha says, for one who gets involved is embroiled in disputes about teachings. But how to dispute with the uninvolved, and about what? For picking up and putting down is not what they do. They have shaken off all views in this very life. So again, one who gets involved in disputes about teachings. So again, this is talking about people who is constantly involved in arguments and debates without any purpose, without any goal. So rather than trying to come to a deeper understanding of the Dhamma, rather than trying to come to a deeper comprehension of ultimate truth, instead it's about my truth and your truth and whose truth is a better truth. It's like, well, it doesn't matter, does it? We're not interested in my truth or your truth. We're just trying to discover the truth, which is not owned by any one person. It's not unique to any one person. Again, so how to dispute with the uninvolved. So again, one of the beautiful statements of the Buddha is the Buddha said, I do not argue with the world. The world argues with me. So, and there's a number of places in the suttas where people would try to argue with the Buddha, and the Buddha just wouldn't get involved. He wouldn't waste his time. The Buddha would engage in conversation only when he saw there was benefit, when he saw that it would help somebody make progress towards awakening. So that's also the thing, is like, well, we don't actually need to get involved in arguments and disputes. We don't need to take sides. We engage in discussion about Dhamma when there's benefit, but not just for the sake of proving our point or lifting ourselves above others or putting ourselves below others, for that matter. And picking up and putting down is not what they do. So what this means, once again, is that they're not establishing a sense of self around my views and my opinions. So the Pali is atta niratta. So atta is again a sense of self, the self-identity and self-importance that we wrap around our set of beliefs and opinions. So in Buddhist practice, we're practicing putting down personal views and opinions, relinquishing personal views and opinions as just being another anchor that keeps us weighed down in samsara, keeps us sinking in the flood. The Buddha says, they have shaken off all views in this very life. So this is what we're aiming for in Buddhist practice. So with the relinquishment of all views, then we see things clearly as they actually are. And this is talking about the relinquishment of wrong view. So Buddhist practice is about cultivating right view as an aid to the relinquishment of wrong view. So whenever the Buddha talks about relinquishing views, he's talking about relinquishing wrong view. Talking about this fixation that we have on our own opinions and views about things, and instead trying to see things as they actually are. So seeing things in terms of the Four Noble Truths, seeing things in terms of the three universal characteristics, rather than just seeing things in terms of our own preferences and opinions. So that's the end of the sutta. We can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and then I'll see if there's any questions. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hello to the people checking in online. Hello to Janaki, Gita, Mary, Manal, Elaine, Maitreyi, Yankee, Jeffrey, Sud, Gregory, Tora, Keith, Bhumika and Ryan. Hello to all of you. And I see a couple questions here. Maitreya says, how will be subtle feelings? I don't understand what you're asking, but this might not be related to the sutta, so you might want to bring your question to Monk Chat tomorrow evening. That's our open Q&A session at this time, Fridays. And Sud says, how should one guard against those feelings of self-appraisal for sake of boosting one's ego when they arise? Well, one thing that's really useful is to first off recognize that there's 2 basic categories of opinion. There are 2 basic categories of debate. So the first one is around the Buddha Dhamma, and the other is around everything else. So in discussions around the Buddha Dhamma, well, your personal opinions don't matter at all, do they? And we're having a discussion, it's just about trying to understand what the Buddha Dhamma is. It's not my Dhamma or your Dhamma, it's just the Buddha Dhamma. So in that case, there are no personal opinions. Personal opinions are completely meaningless. Instead, we can investigate together the Buddha Dhamma and try to come to a better understanding of it. And when it's about anything other than the Buddha Dhamma, well, it just doesn't matter at all, does it? Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. So you also look at your own opinions. It's like, oh, I have an opinion about such and such. So it's meaningless, which means why should I hold on to this opinion? Maybe the other person is right, and who cares? That's also meaningless. Whether my opinion is right or wrong is actually completely irrelevant because it has nothing to do with awakening. So then you might as well relinquish your opinion because who cares? It doesn't matter. Whether your opinion is right or wrong doesn't matter. Like, we get so worked up about the silliest things. It's like, well, I believe that diesel cars are better than gasoline cars. Well, who cares? That doesn't have anything to do with awakening. So who cares? It doesn't matter. Maybe you're right. Who cares? Maybe you're wrong. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Okay, and that's the last question, so we'll go ahead and end the session here with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.